How you doing, Cameron?
Good to see you. How are you?
Doing well. Kind of a warm one today, huh?
Yeah, I like the sun has come back. I like it to stick around for a little while. Okay, I think we're going to get started. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Public Safety Committee of the Anchorage Assembly. It is August 3rd at 3:30 p.m. And Amelia, would you call roll, please?
Sure thing. Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Here.
Mr. Cross. Ms. Allard. Mr. Constant.
Mr. Constant has a meeting and he's excused.
Mr. Dunbar. Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Rivera. Mr. Solti.
I'm here. Thank you.
Mr. Boland.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel.
And Ms. Zalatel also contacted me and she has a conflict, so she's excused. Great. I think we'll be joined by a few others in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and get started. If we can post the agenda in the share area, that would help. Great. All right. So as you can see from the agenda, we've got quite a bit to go over today. Unfortunately, the law department is not able to attend today, mainly because of the change of time. But we have quite a few items from APD and AFD. So we're going to jump right in, and I'll hand it over to Chief Curl.
Good afternoon, Cameron. So let me start first with my injured officers update. So currently I have 3 officers that are out because of gunshot wounds. I'm not going to go over their names because of their privacy. One of them, the one who shot a little less than a year ago, is going for an additional surgery later this week down to Utah, where hopefully a nerve specialist can help deal with the pain that he's going through. It's still it's a slow road to recovery. The officer was shot 4 months ago, excuse me. He continues to slowly progress. It's just his bone was 4 inches of his bone was taken out in one of his legs, and it takes a while for the bone to grow back. And we're just praying for him every day, and hopefully he'll be able to come back in a year or so as he gets better. And the most recent one, which happened a couple weeks ago, officer, he's out of the hospital. He was out of the hospital last week. He's home with his family and doing better than expected. And he's expected to make a full recovery, and we look forward to getting him back. So this is we actually have a 4th officer who was shot about 5 years ago, who has undergone surgery after surgery after surgery. But he's back to full duty, and every once in a while he goes for another surgery, but gets back as soon as he can. Gunshot wounds are serious injury, and all we can do is pray that all these officers will make full recoveries and be able to come back to work when they're physically and mentally able to do so. So that's the update on my injured officers.
Thanks, Chief. Let me interrupt you just for a second and say that we've been joined by Mr. Constant, Mr. Cross, Mr. Dunbar. I think those are the new ones. Thanks. Go ahead.
Okay, do I have any questions? Thanks for all the comments. Wishing my officers a speedy recovery. I appreciate it, and so do their families and the officers themselves. And it's important to the department members as well that we get support from our community leaders and our elected officials when an officer gets hurt on the job. Let's go to impounds update. Amelia, can you put up sheet 1 from my impounds update? Okay, so those of you who've been on the assembly for a while, and those of you who are new, if you don't know, junk vehicles is a constant thorn in the side of the public officials because nobody likes to see junk vehicles. It falls on the police department to tow these vehicles, and I'm giving a budget of $399,000 a year to tow vehicles. I will get to sheet 2 here in a little bit, but this is sheet 1. This is how much the towing actually costs. So we'll skip 2020, 2021, and we'll go to 2022. And right now for a tow in the Anchorage area, it costs $375. If the tow truck goes there and the vehicle's been moved or we cancel it, we still have to pay $100. For Eagle River or Turnagain Arm, the cost is $550. If we cancel that, it costs us $200. Now, motorhomes are expensive, and it costs $1,700 in the city and up to $2,500 on the Turnagain Arm and parts of Eagle River. If we need a rush because the vehicle is abandoned and it's causing a hazard or it's in the right of way, we have to add an additional $300 to that. And any medium or heavy, when they have to call out the medium or heavy tow trucks, it's an extra $350 up to $550. So these are pretty expensive, and we only have we have 2 contracts. One does junk vehicles and one does evidence vehicles. So I just wanted to give you the pricing for these vehicles. It's this is what we're under contract for. Amelia, if you could go to sheet 2.
And Chief, just as you're changing, just want to let folks know we've also been joined by Ms. Quinn Davidson.
And I apologize, Chief. I did not yet save that, but I'm opening it now on Adobe. Just one moment.
So this is where my issue arises. I have $399,000. I am out of money because I don't have July's billings here. I've already paid Alaska Towing and Wrecking $242,000. That's my junk vehicle towing company. I will continue to use Vulcan for those are my evidence vehicles. But I am going to be forced to shut down towing of junk vehicles here in the next couple of weeks because I don't have money to do it. And I need about $400,000 more to continue towing vehicles this year. And we haven't even got to winter. And that's when the junk vehicles really add up. And I'm asking for assistance. The administration knows that I'm in this pickle. They're trying to figure out where we can get another $400,000, but you guys control the purse strings, and anything you can do to get me money so I can continue to impound vehicles would be appreciated. As you can see, and you guys all know, I think all of you know you can send people to my website. I want to report a junk vehicle. If I have to shut that down, we're going to have vehicles all over our highways and side roads, and there's really not much I can do because I just can't afford another $400,000 this year to pay for junk vehicles. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of that and answer any questions if you have any.
Great. Chief, so far I see no one in the chat. Just as a reminder to the members, if you want to get in the queue, just let us know in the chat. So it looks like no questions at this point, Chief.
Okay. DCK, so you on? Did you make it here yet? All right, he should be joining us shortly as well. I'm going to skip over the body cam update right now. I'm going to go to Centennial Campground update. Amelia, if you could put up the slide with Centennial Campground. So this is these are the calls for service we did May 1st through June 30th, you can see we had 27 calls for service at Centennial Park. The month of July, not including the 31st, we've had 158 calls for service there. I've also noted, well, I didn't note here, but I will note that on Boundary and the surrounding area, our calls for service have drastically increased as well. We have put in requests for extra patrols, and our officers do what when they have time, they will do extra patrols, not only through Centennial Park, but in the surrounding area. And whenever you have a concentration of this many people, the call service are bound to go up. If you have a chance to look at that, if I can answer any questions about these calls. One of these calls was the when my officer got shot there, and associated calls associated with that.
Chief, I do have a question for you from Mr. Boland.
Yeah, I'm wondering, when we look at all these calls that you've received and there was the shooting, maybe what your perspective is on community members visiting Centennial Park. The administration has sort of publicly several times encouraged members of the community to visit Centennial Park and see what it's all about. Do you think that it's a safe environment? Would you recommend people from the community visit Centennial Park?
I have not been there myself, but my officers go there all the time. I would feel comfortable going there. I know that they have security there. They have park officials there. I would just be wary wherever you go, whenever you have that many people there, and just if you go there and visit and see the conditions there. I know it's been called many things, but I haven't seen any reports where, I know plenty of people go there, and I have no reports of those people being accosted or being dangerous. I know the mayor goes there, the city manager goes there, many of his staff go there, and I haven't had any reports from any of them that they felt unsafe. So a lot of this violence is usually, or a lot of these calls for service are related to people who are actually at the camp itself. They live next to each other, they get to know each other, and unfortunately, they prey on each other, and usually they don't draw that attention to other people when they're just visiting. So as far as I know, it's a perfectly safe place to visit. And when you go there, I would just check in with the camp people and let security know you're there. And like always, just be with somebody and be cautious.
All right, thank you.
And just for the record, we've been joined by Ms. Allard, and I have a question from Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chief, one of the groups that uses Centennial Park is the Hmong Market on Saturdays and Sundays. And not this past weekend, but the weekend before, I was out there, and one day things were good, and the next day they had quite a number of incidents. They had someone exposing themselves to children. They had a lot of sort of screaming and yelling, and they're worried about people kind of breaking into their cars and that kind of thing while they're busy, with their stalls. And I know I've sort of communicated this to a few people on the at APD, but I wanted to make sure it was on your radar and see, is there some way we could get, you mentioned increased patrols. Can we do that in a way that sort of benefits the Hmong Market and allows them to continue feeling safe to operate there?
I will definitely put that request. I know there's a meeting there. I believe it's Thursday. CAP team will be out there.
That's with a different, I'm sorry, Chief, that's with a different group. That's sort of neighbors along Boundary that myself and Mr. Peterson helped organize. And I do appreciate you sending some officers there. But yeah, the Hmong group has discussed leaving the park, and I could just say, speaking from a lot of people from East Anchorage, we would love to keep them there and have them continue operating. And if there's any way to have increased patrols or some other intervention on Saturdays and Sundays during the market, it would be very much appreciated by them and by us.
I'll look into it. My wife and I go there all the time. There's a special food that you can only find there because of it's a special acquired taste for it.
Yeah, it's a great market, and they're great people, and they just have had a couple of incidents where they don't feel safe. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Any other questions?
Chief, I don't see any in the queue. I have a question just about the slide that's in front of us. It looks like the largest number there at 21 is it DIST? Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, that's a disturbance. So the DIST is the disturbance. The DIST with a W is the disturbance with a weapon.
I see. Okay. And then the only other one that I didn't know was the FU. What is the FU?
That's a follow-up. So
Oh, I see.
that's when officers they're investigating a case and they would go there for follow-up.
Got it. Thank you, Chief. And I don't see any other questions on this item, so I think you can move on.
All right, I'm going to move on to Operation. It says Summer Heat here, is actually Operation Heat Wave. And this had to do with Centennial Park, just one call there where my officer got shot. So Operation Heat Wave was we brought together federal, state, and local agencies, quite a few of them. We had the Alaska State Troopers, Wasilla Police, the Marshals, Homeland Security, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, DEA, Alaska Department of Corrections. We had the Air National Guard Counter Drug Support Unit. We had the State of Alaska Special Prosecutions, the Palmer Police Department, the Airport Police Department, and also Anchorage Police Department. At times we had over 130 officers who were doing a crime sweep across Anchorage. And we do this, we try to do it 2, 3, 4 times a year. Basically just we identify the most violent and prolific offenders and we target them. And we also respond to other reports of criminal activity. So part of this operation, there was a report of criminal drug activity going on at Centennial Park. And so we had planned to go there and investigate it. And that's when the officers came across the vehicle that was associated with an eluding from the night before. Had really nothing to do with the campground at all. And the guy actually wasn't a resident there. But you know, the situation unfolded at Centennial Park. It could have happened anywhere in the city where we ran into the vehicle. But just so happened to happen during Operation Heat Wave, and everything was dealt with appropriately there. Overall, the operation was a success. We have many continuing cases that have evolved from that, which I won't go into because they'll lead to bigger and better things. And hopefully these operations are meant for one thing and one thing only, to make Anchorage a even better and safer place than it already is. And I told all these agencies that were there, when Anchorage is a better and safer place to live, the whole state of Alaska benefits from it. So that's why we do these, and we will continue to do these in the future. Unfortunately, police work is risky, and one of my officers was hurt. Thank God he's going to make a full recovery. Do I have any questions about Operation Heat Wave?
Let's pause just for a second. I don't see any at this point. And just so I understand it, Operation Heat Wave is there a particular type of crime that this operation is focused on?
No, when you have 130 police officers that form together, we break into groups, and we cover the gambit. So we went out there, we basically were looking for violent crime, drug offenses, weapon offenses, those kind of crimes we were focused on this time. So obviously when we went there, we also do stolen vehicles and just a whole gambit across the board. With this many officers present, we were able to hit all parts of the city at the same time during the 2.5 days we did it.
See, thanks. And I do have a question from Miss Allard.
Kick off blackout this month.
Miss Allard, do you have a question?
To kick off blackout.
Miss Allard, are you there? Oh, doesn't seem to be able to get on.
Sorry about that. Technology. Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate it. Chief, I had made a comment in regards to where you had found this this particular person that was arrested and kind of ignited everything in the media and the community. And I had said that this probably couldn't have happened at a better location. And I didn't say it to offend anybody or that anybody's lives were worth more than others. My point about that was because if we did it in the heart of downtown, the person could have ran off in a vehicle. There could have been a totally different outcome. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Just because, looking at it from that standpoint, because it is isolated at the campground, it happened, and that is a good location. The only problem is there were plenty of innocent people around there because of the campsites, but the campsites are pretty, they're spread out there. I know that one of the vehicles that was involved where the suspect ran to didn't even know the guy. I mean, they just happened to be parked near the gentleman that decided that he wanted to try to run from the police and then shoot us. But like I said, because of the backdrop there for the gunfire, it's pretty open there, and there's no congestion. Like I said, if it happened in the middle of the mall or somewhere like that, it could have been a lot worse.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks. And Chief, I don't see any other questions at this point, so I think you can move forward.
All right. Well, Deputy Chief Case is on the line. He's gonna cover the body cam update, and then not really the social media process, but the other topic that he's going to cover those two, and then I'll finish up with the thing you added in the email. Cameron talked about Narcan a little bit. So yeah, Sean, if you're there.
And Chief, I noticed that we didn't have it on here, but you were also gonna talk about the incident around someone pulling someone over who had a car.
That's the social media thing.
Is it okay? Great.
Yeah. Take it away, Sean.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll start with body-worn camera and give you an update on that. We are still actively involved in conversations with the APDEA, and we're continuing to work through that process. We have another meeting here coming up where we'll sit down and chat again, just trying to agree on some of the language and some of the specifics of the policy. So we are, we're actively working on that. It's turned out to be a much longer process than we had hoped, just from start to finish, all the way through. So that's really the only update that I have for you. We are continuing to move forward with selecting a vendor as well. And so even if this process carries on for, another weeks or months or whatever it is, it's not going to slow us down in actually ordering the equipment, so that when the policy is ready to go, we can immediately start training and implementation. Once we get the equipment, the software and hardware, there's lengths of time that it takes to get everything up and running, and we want to make sure that we shorten that as much as we can, even though we're still going through the process with the APDEA.
Great. And it doesn't look like I have a question from Mr. Salty.
Sorry, I was buried in Teams. Through the chair, so I know you probably would have said it if you knew an answer, but I get this all the time. Do you have an estimated time frame for when you feel that body cams would be deployed at just a ballpark?
If we can't get some sort of resolution with the union, then we have the grievance process that we go through, and like everything else in the world we have today, that process is delayed for the availability of arbitrators. So it could be months before that process resolves itself.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
And I have a question for you, but it's not on this topic, so I'll wait on that one. I do have a couple of questions for you. So you mentioned that you're going to proceed forward with the purchase of the equipment, and you may have already said this. Have you decided on a vendor yet?
No, we are. Chief, you may have to pop in there because I don't know the exact time frame we're in that process, but we put it out to RFP, and so we're close to selecting a vendor. Yeah, we're towards the tail end of that portion.
Actually, we haven't yet. We're still working on the RFP. We had to, not only body cameras, but we need to put our in-car video system on the same RFP and our interview room. So we want to have the same technology across the board. So we're working on that RFP. My IT specialist had 2 weeks of leave, and he should be finishing up with that RFP here to get out on the street here shortly. I'll make him have it done by the end of next week.
Okay. And so it's my understanding, and I don't think we have folks here from the Department of Law, but that's one of the key factors for them in terms of them determining the costs related to body cams for their systems is knowing what equipment you're going to use, and then they'll know what kinds of systems they need to be able to have in place to be able to, to have the recordings and have the right infrastructure in place. So so the sooner that you have the vendor and those picked out, I think the sooner then we can start to think about what the costs are going to be on their side as well. It looks like no other questions on this topic. Mr. Cross is in the queue, but he has a question about the overall budget, and so we can hold that until. Oh wait, actually I got a question from Mr. Voland.
Yeah, thank you for the update on body cameras. I will be candid. It is, I think, frustrating to hear that it could still be months before they're online. And it's something that I hear very often, even me being a new guy from constituents, that people are sort of tired of waiting for this to be implemented. I do have a question, and I don't know if you can answer this right now, but because if policy negotiations are still going on, do we have any type of sense of what percentage of officers on patrol would be wearing body cameras?
I mean, eventually the way the policy is written and the intended use of the body cams is that all of our patrol officers will have body cameras.
And they'll all be actively wearing them while they're on patrol at all times?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Doesn't look like there's any other questions on this topic, so I think we can move on.
The next thing I'll talk about.
Oh, wait, go ahead. Is that Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thank you. I was in the queue like 3 items ago. Somehow just the text didn't come through maybe.
Oh, sorry.
I have to leave. And I just wanted to put something in the record here. It was asserted that issues didn't come to a head out at Centennial Park until the officer was injured. And I want to say that was in fact only one element in a whole series of problems that actually started around June 26th. And so I just need to make sure the record is complete and no one leaves thinking that things just got bad at that time because of this enforcement action that was going on. And in fact, it was bad there long before that. So I'm sorry I have to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. I don't see any other questions at this point, so I think Chief, you can continue, or
I'll keep going, Mr. Chair. So the next thing I want to talk about is the social media post that I think is circulated around and everybody's familiar about. I'll kind of give you a brief update. And so on July 9th, the Anchorage Police Department became aware of a social media post with an officer in a photograph where a motorist that he stopped was holding a white privilege card and then posted it on her social media site with some narrative of what transpired during the traffic stop. And then that was picked up by a whole host of folks. So I'm going to assume that everyone probably is aware of that and knows about that. When we became aware of it, which is 2 days after the event, we first of all, we recognized that that post, what was contained in that post, caused a bit of a public uproar, and there were a lot of people that saw that and did not like that post, had some negative reactions to that, thought it was an inappropriate post, and we recognized that. We immediately started an internal investigation where the officers, again, this is kind of out on social media already, were placed on administrative leave while we conducted the investigation. The investigation took us 11 days to complete. The investigation is closed currently. The result of the investigation is that there were sustained complaints within that investigation. And the details of what was sustained and what policy violations are personnel issues. So I won't get into the details of that. So that's kind of the sequence of events. I'll kind of address a couple things just to clear up some questions that I anticipate people will ask. The units that were conducting the traffic stop on this particular driver are part of our impaired driving unit. And the justification for the stop was an extremely minor infraction of lane straddling, weaving in the lane, a sign of impairment, which is what they're out there doing. They did not issue a citation for the incident. I will say that it is an extremely rare, I can't give you the exact data, but I will tell you it is an extremely rare situation where an officer would issue a citation for that particular offense. The driver did in fact have a valid driver's license. And so the driver was not cited for not having a valid driver's license. So that's, I'm more than happy to take questions. Unfortunately, I can't give you a whole heck of a lot more than what I have already provided, but you can certainly give it a try.
All right. Are there any questions on this topic from members?
I have a question, Cameron. This is Member Voland.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so, for me, representing one of the most diverse districts in not only Anchorage, but the United States, I heard a lot of frustration, of hurt over this and confusion. And while I can appreciate, that certain things are personnel matters, obviously people want to know, what is APD going to do about this going forward? What further guidance, education, training, is there anything that APD is going to do to sort of correct this, or at least, I guess, cultural sensitivity training? Is there anything that APD is actively doing to just make sure that there's an awareness and a culture of making it so that everyone who lives in Anchorage, all kinds of diverse people, feel served, feel protected? Because I appreciate the work that you guys do. I acknowledge the incredible risk involved and the need that we have as a community for our officers. But I think people want to hear what APD is going to do just to help maybe their officers understand why this was not something that was perceived in a positive light.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So a couple things. The training aspect of it, those wheels are already in motion. It's not a result of this particular situation. There's an ongoing need within the police department, not for any specific reason other than it's part of our job to continuously provide training to our officers in anything that's related to whether it's cultural diversity, whether it's how to better communicate with the public that we serve. I can tell you that we've got training coming up here at the end of the month with the entire command staff that it would fall under the category of a cultural diversity type of training. We have our recruits in the academy that also get the training. Then we have in-service training scheduled for in a couple months. I believe it gets kicked off, and there will also be an element of that in-service training that will also cover that same topic. Above and beyond that too, or before the end of the year, we will we're investing in some other training as well. Again, that's kind of, you think of it from the communication aspect, because it's, saying cultural diversity in of itself is one piece of the puzzle, but there's kind of an overall and overarching kind of theme and message that in law enforcement we're always maintaining and keeping up on. And one of those is communicating and interacting with the diverse community that we have here in Anchorage. It's not a one-time training that we want to check a box and say, hey, we gave this training to our employees. It's something that's reoccurring, year after year. And that training on a regular basis has to be modified and adjusted based on, what we're currently seeing, not just in our community, but, around the country. So we've got a few new pieces of training that are coming out here this year that go along with some of the trainings that we've done, in previous years.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
I have a question for Mr. Cross.
Well, less of a question than more of more of a thought on this, is that it speaks to the difficulty our officers have, because, our publics carry cameras everywhere and they're taking a snapshot of a moment in time, and we all understand how wildly inaccurate the public can be with information that's given. And I commend them for taking 11 days to investigate this while this poor guy sat on administrative leave because somebody in the car had a stupid thing in their hands, and the look on the officer's face could have been like, this is ridiculous, or what is this? Like, sometimes you're just kind of taken back by the absurdity of human beings. And so I just appreciate the way that the department responded to this. I don't believe anything of malice or ill content was intended. And it just speaks to how volatile, how difficult their job is when they're being looked at by everybody. But here we sit in the safety and comfort that they help provide us on a daily basis. And yet they're not only literally being fired at, but then they have to face inaccurate or deceiving social media posts. And so I just really appreciate our department, because it seems like they're being attacked from everywhere. And so I appreciate the time they spent to investigate this. I agree with being sensitive to the public, but it just speaks to how truly difficult their job is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And going to what Kevin just said about inaccurate information being posted by members of the public. So Chief Case, you had said that the person that made the post did have their license. And I think in the post they stated that they didn't, and that's why they showed that card. So can you clarify that? Did the individual actually show their license, or was the officer able to sort of ascertain that they had a license some other way?
So since I tracked this whole thing from start to finish, she posted later on that she had the license on her person. I believe it was in a pocket or something, okay, and updated her post. So we did not obtain the physical driver's license from her. We, in fact, one of the videos that she posted herself, you hear the officer asking for her name and date of birth, and based on that was able to do a limited search for her driver's license status.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's clarifying.
Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Cameron. I also wanted to just appreciate what Kevin had said. And the APD police officers nationally, even worldwide, are under a microscope. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. And I absolutely appreciate the APD leadership addressing the situation. I don't know all the background details, nor should I. It's something that the Human Resource and APD handles, and I trust your guys' judgment. And, it was a poor choice, however it came down, but I really do just appreciate you guys addressing the issue and handling it within. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. It looks like that's all of the questions and comments we have on that item. Thank you, Mr. Case. And I think we can go on, Chief, to the final item on your agenda.
Okay, Cameron, this is actually not on the agenda, but you asked me to talk about Narcan.
Yeah.
So first, talking about inaccurate Facebook posts, and everyone thinks everything on Facebook and the internet is true. I can tell you that it's not. but somebody posted that APD was at a scene for 10 minutes and some guy died because we didn't give him Narcan, and that is an absolute lie. And we actually found the call. It was more like 30 seconds, and the paramedics showed up, did what they do, and the guy walked away. So I just want to remind people that things can, I appreciate the Assembly Member Cross's input on things are deceiving, because they are deceiving, and people run wild and sometimes think everything's true they read on the internet or Facebook, and it's not. But Narcan. So I will tell you right now, we do not carry Narcan. And Dr. Levy, the fire department's medical advisor, is also our medical advisor. And he has always advised us, he did not think it was a good idea for the Anchorage Police Department to carry Narcan, because we have a great co-response with the fire department. They are trained medical professionals. We do basic first aid. That's what we're trained to do. And the fire department shows up with their guys and they do a medical assessment and determine if it's a drug overdose, and if they don't actually carry Narcan, they carry naloxone or something like that. And he's always advised us that unless you know for sure, that they tell us, assume that a person who's unconscious has gone into cardiac arrest. And the last thing you want to do, the first thing you want to do is give CPR. That's what we've always done. And then we'd have a great response with the medical professionals who come and do an evaluation. So it's always been, hey, APD, we don't advise you to carry it. And that's been our procedure. We don't carry it. There's also been a report that we received. So that's the base. Now, as we get advised differently, we are now, Dr. Levy is saying, I just read the article, and he also says that he doesn't have a problem with us carrying it anymore. So we are going to evaluate whether we should carry it. There's, granted, Narcan can save lives. We have to come up with a policy on its use. We have to come up with and training for all the officers to use it. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork to give free Narcan right now. Once that's over, Narcan's like $37.50 a dose, and we need to come up with a funding source for future when Narcan expires. Most of the Narcan I see that they were giving out yesterday expires August of 2023. And for a department this size, we're gonna have to buy a lot of Narcan, and it's gonna be expensive, and the majority of that's gonna get thrown away because we're not gonna use it. The 600 doses that we were given, it's ludicrous to think that the police department would keep 600 doses when we couldn't use it and not give it back to get it into the hands of people who are actually trained and use it. So I don't know why people have a problem with us returning Narcan that we're not using. But we are looking at it. We have a discussion tomorrow with my command staff. We are going to start working on a policy. We will get further recommendations from Dr. Levi. I'll make sure it's coordinated through city legal. I've already coordinated with the union. They don't have a problem as long as we properly train our officers and instruct them on how to use it. So going forward, we will probably have a change in our status as whether we're carrying Narcan or not. It all depends on what our medical advice is from Dr. Levy. Again, in that story yesterday, he says that he'd rather us assume it's cardiac arrest than do CPR, and then later he doesn't mind if we carry it. So I just need clear guidance and direction so my officers aren't confused on the scene. And there's other safety concerns that I won't address here, that we have to make sure our policy addresses that so that my officers are safe if they do administer Narcan on the scene. And there's a lot of other things that are involved as well that I won't go into because it's not the appropriate place for it. But that's why APD doesn't carry Narcan now, and we are considering going forward and carrying it in the future. Do I have any questions?
Thanks, Chief. Yes, I have a question from Mr. Voland.
Yeah, well, thank you through the chair. I appreciate that you are considering carrying Narcan. You know, it's not hard to administer. I have Narcan in my office, and I can certainly appreciate that, you know, training is required. Other police forces carry Narcan. So anything that I can do, and I would just throw it out to my fellow members here. I would love to support APD in those efforts and put our heads together on how we can get that funded, because I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chief, I was just happened to think that sometimes your officers get involved with some drug substances. What if one of your officers accidentally got some fentanyl and had an overdose? I would think it would be nice to have some Narcan on hand to just to protect the life of the officer. Is that something you might consider using it for?
We certainly would, but like I said, the response from the fire department here in the city is fantastic. And Dr. Olivier has told us the most important thing when you have an opioid overdose is to make sure that you continue CPR. And the response from the fire department, they're all with this. A lot of the fire departments that use this, if you read the article in the paper today, Lucilla said they go times where they don't have a medic rig available. Thank God we don't have that problem here. The troopers, they could go weeks without medical attention up there. So it's different. The co-response here is fantastic, and we have faith in our fire department and our trained medics that they would come and assess the officer as well as anyone else who is suspected of having an overdose from an opiate, that the response will be good. But my officer safety is always at the top of my list. And like I said, we are reevaluating whether we're going to carry Narcan or not. And that's about all I can say.
Thank you.
And it looks like I have a question from Mr. Sulte.
Thank you. Through the chair. So Chief Girl, I just want to say thank you for the report, and thank you to the officers and their family for everything they do and keeping us safe and on occasion putting themselves in harm's way. So we're talking about Narcan, which is kind of a post-incident response, and I'm very much towards prevention. So I don't know if you can speak briefly on what we're doing to prevent drugs in our city, to go after the dealers, to go after manufacturing. And I imagine that's probably a sensitive subject because there's probably a lot of ongoing work, but is there kind of a synopsis you can give us to the efforts in that area?
Yeah, we have Anchorage is a HIDTA, which is a high intensity drug trafficking area. So we have federal response. We are teamed up with the feds, and we have a tremendous response toward drug crimes in the city. And we are going after not only street use, but also mid and upper level drug dealers. We team up with the airport, HIDTA as well, and we do interdiction at the airport. So we have a strong emphasis on going after the source. I won't get into the social aspects of. We all know this is a multi-agency response. We need treatment. We need addiction treatment. We need a bunch of things up here. You're right. We deal with the aftermath. We don't deal with the police department doesn't deal with the problems. I think that's more of a multi-agency approach, but we deal with the dealer problem. We can't deal with the social aspects of it as a police department, even though we do try.
And through the chair, Chief Girl, is there anything that we as citizens can do to help in either situation of post or pre-incident?
Just call the police when you see criminal activity. That's the biggest thing. A lot of people are afraid to call the police. A lot of people call. You guys all know this. You guys get reports from citizens all the time, and you send them to me or Deputy Chief Case, and it's like, you need to be telling your constituents to make sure they call the police and not just talk to you guys, because it doesn't help us after the fact when something happened 24 or 48 hours ago and people don't report it to us right away. We can't it's hard to deal with the aftermath of anything unless we can actually deal with when it actually happened.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Ms. Stanley, to the meeting. Chief, I think that's all the questions that I can see. Do you have anything else to add before we move on?
No, that's it. Thank you all. And I'll be here till 5:30 if you have if any questions pop up.
Great. All right, let's move over to the Anchorage Fire Department. Chief, are you ready to go?
I am. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I will be brief. I have 3 topics to cover, as you can see on the agenda. The first item is our responses to Centennial Campground in July. Our calls to the campground were up about 50% over the prior month, which were at that time about 400% higher than what is typical. Not surprising. In July, we responded a total of 48 different times to the campground, and ASP responded an additional 33 times. There were a total of 83 calls between the fire department and ASP to Centennial Campground. During the same period, the good news is we only responded 7 times to the Sullivan Arena, and only one of those was an emergency medical call. The others were good intent calls and similar low problem calls. We did go out to Centennial and do a FireWise assessment in July, and we've done some outreach to the residents there. And that's a summary of our response activity to Centennial. I will say that it has changed the character of our responses to that area. Firstly, because we're mainly going to the same number of calls. It's just in a different location, but it's tapping resources from different areas. So previously, the Sullivan Arena and the downtown area were under protection from Fire Station 1, which has 2 engines, an aerial company, and 3 ambulances. And now we're responding from Station 6 in large part, which is 1 engine and 1 ambulance. And so the downtown station is still picking up a lot of those calls. Station 3 is picking up some calls there. The result is that the response time, the transport times, and the overall out of service times are longer just because the distance is further from where our resources are. But aside from that, I think it's not been really problematic for us. We've been able to manage all the incidents that have come our way. I'm happy to take any questions before I move on to the next topic.
Thanks, Chief. I don't see any questions. I have a question, though. Can you give us a sense of what the nature of the calls you're getting to Centennial Campground? Are there particular types of calls that you're seeing?
The calls that we had, of the 48 fire and EMS calls that we had, 4 of those were fire calls. Those were minor fire and smoke in the area calls. Didn't require much in the way of resources. The remaining 44 were ambulance calls. Of those, 9 were traumas, 5 were assaults, 5 were overdoses, 5 unconscious other, 2 were exposure calls, a lot of seizure calls, childbirth call, a few things like that. So that gives you a sense of what the nature of those calls was.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
I don't see any other questions in the queue right now, so I think you can move on to your next item.
Okay, next item is an update on our mobile crisis team. We don't have complete statistics for July just yet, so I'm reporting June numbers. The MCT in June was in service for 22 of 30 days. They took 178 calls. They did 60 post-incident follow-ups. 86% of the clients or the subjects that they encountered were treated on scene and required no transport, and were followed up with additional care. 15 were transported to local hospitals. 1 was transported by APD. And the most common types of calls that the MCT was responding to include distress calls, suicidal ideation, medical assist, and psychosis. Since our last meeting, as requested, I have updated the AFD website to include a link to the mobile crisis team. And we're still working on the 311 menu, finding an appropriate place to plug the MCT in there. And we have, since our last meeting, hired, I'm sorry, is somebody trying to interject?
Yeah, I think somebody needs to mute. It sounds like there's somebody that's just unmuted. Thanks, Chief.
And since our last meeting, we've hired a second clinician to fill the vacancy that occurred. There's been no real progress to report on the effort to move the MCT to 24-hour service, but that's something we're continuing to work on. If there are any questions, I'll take them now and before I move to the next subject.
Yep, I have, looks like I have a question from Mr. Cross.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chief Strange. I'm curious as to how the public seems to be responding and how you find that, since this is the mobile crisis team being something relatively new here in Anchorage, and as we're expanding that practice, how are you finding those responses? Are you finding that the public is clear on what defines the need for a mobile crisis team? As a mobile crisis team showing up, and perhaps it should have been EMT or vice versa. How are you finding the public is as far as delineating what would be the appropriate individual to report to a call?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Cross. I think there's a broad awareness of the existence of the mobile crisis team. I don't think there is a broad understanding of exactly what they do or how they do it. So most of the front end work occurs in the APD dispatch center, where they will receive a call, and just like they receive any 911 call, and if it appears to be something that involves a behavioral issue, they have an algorithm that they will follow to identify if this is a call that's appropriate for the MCT or if it should remain with the police department and involve a police officer response. So that's proven to be pretty effective. The calls that come to the fire department that are crisis team calls are, for the most part, they should be crisis team calls. We are appropriately triaging those. One of the advantages of having a medical provider on the MCT, which is a paramedic, is they are equipped and experienced to be able to assess that patient and determine if we missed triage that patient. And if that's the case, then they can provide transport or call for an ambulance.
All right, excellent. That's exactly what I was looking for, because the complexity of diagnosing something in the field and making sure that we send the appropriate individuals. But that's excellent to know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I don't see anyone else in the queue at this point, Chief, so I think you can move forward.
Okay, finally, thank you, sir. Finally, I just wanted to share with you that we are now accepting applications for firefighters. We have a firefighter academy scheduled, our annual firefighter academy scheduled for January 18th. We began accepting applications today, and we'll accept those applications through the end of this month, and I think maybe a little bit beyond that. And so we've been busy recruiting, and would request your assistance in reaching out to people who you think might be interested in joining the work that we do at the fire department. That's the end of my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. I don't see any questions at this point. Oh, I do, Mr. Cross.
Actually, I was going to ask you the same question I was going to ask Chief Carl, and that's regarding the overall budget. And, you know, the mayor's office put out an ARPA request for 3.7 million for fuel, and there's a fuel shortage. And recent conversations have been taking place both in the public and then from the administration of how critical or how dire the fuel shortage situation actually is. And perhaps we as Assembly were not aware of just how bad that situation. Can you speak as to a fuel budget, what that looks like, if that's what you guys are planning, if you anticipate this significant shortage regarding the cost of fuel is going to have immediate impacts on providing service? I mean, can you just speak to this significant budget shortfall in the fuel?
Yes, sir. Assemblymember Cross, thank you for that question, and through the chair. Yes, so we've already expended our fuel budget for the year. Our fuel budget is, I don't know the exact number from memory, but it's just a little bit north of 300,000. And we have spent that much already this year. So we will exceed our fuel budget by the end of this year by 100% or more. Unlike some of the other municipal agencies, we have not significantly adjusted our practices. For example, we're not going to different sites to shop for cheaper fuel or anything like that. We fuel from our own sites that we buy the fuel in bulk. We store it at the fire stations and we dispense it there. So we haven't really changed our operations. We haven't cut back on any kinds of calls. So the real impact for us is we will just overspend our fuel budget, and we will have to find some budget cushion elsewhere in our budget. So it may come from other non-labor, or we may have to reduce other expenses elsewhere.
So through the chair, you've already spent your 300,000. Of course, we're a little over 50% through the year, call it 60%. And so you go that by 100%. So just your department alone, we're at least 300,000 short on just the fuel. And perhaps more, just depending. I mean, we can hope that prices go down, but it looks like they flatlined at least temporarily.
Yes, sir. I agree with that. Thank you.
And that goes back to the police department. It was the same question. I mean, how much do they anticipate they're short? What does that look like? Have they had to alter operations any facing the significant shortage? Thank you.
Yes, I'm Member Cross. This is Chief Curl. We don't alter operations at all. The only thing we do differently is we have a fuel pump that's at 23 over at Tudor and Elmore, and we expect our officers to refuel there, which basically takes, it's in the heart of the city, so it takes longer to go there to refuel because the only people that bid on our fuel contract this year was Chevron. And if anyone ever drives by Chevron, you can see how expensive fuel is there. We expect to be over our fuel budget by about between $600,000 and $750,000 based on what we've already consumed. But I've been told by fleet management that they expect us to exceed it by about 1.1 million. So our calculations and theirs are a little bit different.
Mr. Cross, did your questions get answered?
Yeah, I'm just writing it down. So on I guess, obviously, public safety taking priority over an immediate budget shortfall. I guess just to help me put in perspective on a scale, it's hard to say, but I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, how urgent is this that we need to deal with this immediately to make sure that budget item is taken care of? It sounds like we have a little bit of flex, but understand that we are over budget. We will end up having to come up with the money sometime. It's better to know sooner than later and make sure those funds are set aside. I'm just trying to weigh the urgency of this because I know there was an ARPA request and I know that we've set things around, but this does give us an opportunity to amend or to maybe reassess what we had given as some priorities to see that we kind of cushion the shortfall some. So I guess, can we speak to how urgent of a budget item this is?
Yes, sir. Well, speaking for the fire department, I mean, we're not going to stop responding to calls or putting diesel in our ambulances or gasoline in our other vehicles. So we're gonna spend the money from other parts of our budget to make sure that we keep the ambulances and the fire trucks on the road. So as long as we have some reasonable expectation that there will be some relief before the end of the year, I would categorize it as not urgent. But we're sitting on the edges of our seats wondering if that's actually going to come forth. I know that the administration is working hard to try to find some relief for us, and that's encouraging.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. I have a Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Mr. Cross for raising that. It's a good idea. I just wanted to let the administration know, I think Amy already maybe knows this, but that Forrest and I put on the agenda for our next budget committee to talk about fuel costs, and we hope that Ms. Demboski or whoever should be there can be there so we can talk about how we can solve this problem. Even if it's not urgent, we know it's something that will need to be solved. And we're hopeful at the last budget committee meeting, it sounds like there's quite a bit more in community assistance than the administration was expecting. So we've asked, I think, Desiree to check on that, make sure that's the case, and then maybe we can work collaboratively to use some of those funds or other funds to ensure we have sufficient funding for fuels, because I know that's important to not only us and the administration, but certainly residents in the community who rely on these services. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Austin, for bringing it up and having a plan out there, and also Kevin for bringing it up so that we can all discuss. If Chief is on, Chief, is it the same with you that it's not urgent at this very moment? Sorry, Chief Carroll, sorry.
You know, I hate to say it, but you know, public safety has to come first. We can't alter the way we do business. I track my budget every 2 weeks when the pay period is. Right now, I'm a little bit under projected budget, but if I look at this, if I look at my towing contract, I'm looking at $1 million over budget. And is that urgent? Well, to me, it's I want to come under budget, even though I don't think I was budgeted appropriately to begin with. But I would love to come under budget. But when things like this come up, these are out of my control, and to me, it should be urgent because we should fund things that have to do with public safety. And this is not only public safety. This has to do with, you know, the buses. This has to do with snow removal and street maintenance. This has a lot of things. A lot has to do with. No one expected to see $5.50 a gallon gas. No one. And you just can't predict for that. That's why we need flexibility, and we need to consider these things urgent. And is that a good enough answer?
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. And yes, Chief, it is. And that's I was, because I kind of find it more urgent than not. And so then I wanted to come back and follow up and ask you that. My other question is, so we were on task based on your budget to have the amount for the fuel, but 100% or close to, because of the difference in the fuel prices, it just totally threw everything off. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I don't think anyone predicted gas to be $5.50 a gallon, or I think it's under $5 now. But I don't think any of us could have predicted that even 8 months ago.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate it.
Sure. I think that's it. And so, Chief Schrage, anything else you wanted to add before we end your part?
Sure. I thank you for the offer. I appreciate the discussion about the urgency of the fuel problem. I guess I would characterize it when I said it wasn't urgent. What I mean is it doesn't have to be addressed today or next week, but it is essential. It is something that must be addressed before the end of the budget year. So I don't mean to in any way understate how important it is that we get the funding for the unanticipated fuel cost. But whether it happens today or in a few weeks, it's, in my assessment, is fine.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on. I do believe that Sarah Stanley is here live from the courthouse. There's no specific items under your updates, but if there's anything you'd like to share at this point, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One thing that I wanted to share was we had an international visitor in the last couple weeks. We had someone from Australia come. He has a grant to travel all over the world and learn about best DV prosecution practices. And he chose Anchorage as one of his places to visit in part due to our alternative courts and the way that APD works with our office. So that was really great. We got to show him around, and he got to meet our staff, our people from Warrens who work with our DV department, as well as the 2 DV APD officers in the courthouse. And he's going on to travel all around the country. He's already been to Canada. He also networked with UAA and some various agencies, and he's linking us all together. So we're looking forward to some of the connections and maybe some innovative programs that we can learn about from his connections. So hopefully that will bear fruit, over the next year. It was a really great experience. And he really enjoyed seeing what we do in collaboration with APD and the court system. I think I should at times put a recruitment update under my section. If everyone else is recruiting, I should say that we have an attorney position open as well. So we are currently looking for a domestic violence prosecutor. Other than that, we are plugging along. End of summer, cases get busier as all the not us, my attorneys, but as some defense attorneys come back from vacation and as defendants come back from seasonal activities like fishing. So we're going to hit our busy season here in September. That's all I have.
Super. Thank you, Sarah. And I do have a question from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there was news today that a bill became law that increased funding for state prosecutors, so the state is going to be able to fill some of their empty positions and increase pay to some of their attorneys. And I'm wondering if you think this might have any negative effects on our recruitment, and what also in short term, what effect this might have on getting caught up on the backlog of cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would expect that, whenever the gap between the state pay at the DA's office and our office, whenever, it sort of narrows and broadens at various points in time, whenever that broadens, it makes our recruiting harder, and it makes it easier for the state to poach our people, so to speak. So yes, I had heard that was on the horizon for the state. And one thing we can offer in our office is I think we have a really great office that's pretty collegial, and I think people are willing to stay when they choose to stay. It's because they really enjoy our work environment. But having said that, I always want that gap to be smaller. As far as the backlog, we are down one attorney right now. Obviously, when we're completely fully staffed, we can dig into our cases more and do better evaluation of which cases we want to take all the way to trial, and which ones are maybe not cases where the evidence is maybe not so great, and they need to be negotiated and go away.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see any additional questions at this point. Anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, super. Thanks for your time, and thank you to all of the presenters today. It was great information. We are going to move on at this point to audience participation. If there's anyone who would like to speak, I believe, is it *6? Is that correct? I'm looking to Yeah, I think it's star six. So if you'd like to speak, we'll just go first come, first serve. You'll have 3 minutes. State your name for the record and go ahead and start, and then I'll have a little alarm that'll go off at 3 minutes, so you'll know that your time is up. Is there anyone on the call that would like to speak at this point?
Hello.
Yes. Go ahead and state your name for the record, and you can begin.
Hi, I'm Celeste Hodge Groudon, and I am the president and CEO of the Alaska Black Caucus. And first of all, I just want to thank APD for sharing those findings on the white privilege situation. As a Black person, I was truly offended. And maybe some can't understand that because they're not a person of color, they're not Black. But that was deeply offensive to members within our community and to some that are racially profiled by law enforcement. So I think it just matters differently to people based on the color of your skin. Because I can't understand why the officers found that humorous. And I heard the comments about pictures being taken in time and, you know, maybe we didn't see the full extent of what was going on. But what I did see, I don't appreciate. And I believe that there needs to be some deep cultural training, not the typical cultural training or trainings that happen at APD that allow these kind of things to happen. Because I understand this isn't the only time we've had a situation like this. So I wanted to go on record to share that and to also say I serve on the Anchorage Community Police Relations Task Force. That task force was originally named the Minority Community Police Relations Task Force. And that task force exists to try to build the relationship, to work to resolve concerns within the diverse community and law enforcement. And we recently had a complaint where there was an individual that weaved and received a $500 citation. She had a driver's license, but she received a $500 citation. So she brought that issue to the task force to try to see if we could resolve it. This person was Black, though, and she didn't have a white privilege card. So I'm sharing that to say, you know, this is something that exists within this community, and we need to take a better look at situations when they happen and not put out a statement that doesn't even speak to the issue. The other thing I want to share is last Sunday, or the Sunday before, I was at worship service, and we had a situation where there was an individual that was going through mental crises. And I tried the Q1. I'm sorry, I'm out of time, but thank you.
Well, you can go and wrap up if you have one or two more sentences if you want to finish.
I just want to say that I found it very educational to try to get help for this individual. I dialed the 211 and I dialed the 311 after calling individuals to try to figure out what the process was. I didn't get any help because it went to voice recordings or whatnot. Press 1, press 2, press 3. And so I found myself talking with 911, and I didn't want to have to do that, but I did. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else at this point who would like to speak? If you're on mute, just go *6 to take yourself off of mute.
Hello?
Yes, yes, go ahead and state your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Emily Clock, and I live in District 3. Was calling today to hear, in particular, the update on body-worn cameras, and I am glad to hear that things are at least starting to move forward. It sounds like with selecting a vendor, but that the information that was presented was pretty conflicting. So I'm hoping maybe there can be one more moment to clarify whether there is already an RFP out or whether the RFP won't be coming out until next week because it needs to be revised. So I appreciate hearing that things are moving on that, but again, to not have a timeline on the body-worn cameras is just continuing to be a point of frustration for me. And I think that the reason, again, that the public wanted these body-worn cameras is to have transparency and build trust with APD. And I think this issue with the white privilege card and an officer taking a picture as if this is a joke shows why, like one of the many reasons why body-worn cameras are necessary. Because if APD is already doing training in cultural diversity, then either it's not working or these officers that were part of this incident are not following those guidelines or not being trained enough. I feel really disappointed to hear that it doesn't sound like there's an apology for what happened either, or an acknowledgement that that was wrong and hurtful. At the very least, when I mess up at work, I do my best to acknowledge that to the people who I've hurt and say that I understand why that was hurtful. And honestly, I think at the very least, that is owed to the public, that there were many people who were very hurt by the situation. And at the very least, it shows that these officers understood that what they did was wrong and that they accept responsibility. But it kind of sounds like there really haven't been any consequences. I appreciate that there's been an investigation, but what happens now? So to me, this just continues to point out, I think, why we need to have transparency and build that accountability, particularly with body-worn cameras, so that we know what's happening. Because what's happening in terms of training versus what's actually happened when people are pulled over, if there's a difference there, it's important for the department to understand that, because clearly these officers thought that something like this white privilege card could be treated as a joke. And to me, it says they are not there to serve and protect all. So again, I would, if there's time, like some clarity on the RFP, whether that is out or not for the vendor. And I appreciate time to comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. If we have time, I can have the chief speak to that. Is there anybody else at this point who would like to speak from the public? This is a reminder, it's *6 to take yourself off of mute. Would anybody else like to speak at this point? Okay, going once, going twice.
Hello.
Yes, yes. Please state your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Susan Reed, and I live in Midtown, and I'm a retired public school teacher. I am also a member of the Alaska Black Caucus Justice Committee, and I was so heartened when our community voted for body cams for the police in terms of, I think it's better for everyone, our officers as well as the public, to have a visual and audio record of anything that happens between people so that the truth can come out as needed. And I am much a supporter of our public police department, but I also believe that sometimes there are occasions where it's necessary to have a better record of what has occurred. It's frightening to me that this is taking so long after the people had voted that body cams were important to us, and now it's taking, again, your report today was that it would be perhaps months before this goes through the review process with the police union. I'm just, my jaw's on the floor, and I wish there was a way of just, can we move through this process? The people spoke. I have police officer friends. People are supportive of this. Let's get this process done so we can move forward together for the better good of all of us. So thank you for anything that can get done to get this going. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this point? I heard a dog. So as a reminder, *6 to take yourself off of mute, and this is the time for audience for participation. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Sorry about that. That's me. All right. Doesn't sound like we have anybody else at this point. And so I'm gonna, in our last couple of minutes, hand it back over to Chief Curl. And Chief Curl, if you could just clarify for us what the status of the RFP process is, and whether the RFP has gone out yet, and if it has not, when we can expect the RFP to go out.
Sure. So the RFP is being written. It's being, my information technology manager is writing it. He was on leave for 2 weeks. He just got back this week. He is doing some final tweaks to make sure that we cover everything, and I will direct him to make sure it is done by next Friday.
Next Friday. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that clarification. And just one last call for any other audience member who has not spoken at this point. Anyone else who would like to speak? Great. Well, thank you to our speakers today. Thank you to the public who came to the meeting and spoke. Really appreciate that. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.